It feels like interest rates were just at 1%, and in a couple months, they're already at 6%, maybe even going to 7, if not higher. And the question that I get asked all the time is interest rates gonna kill the Lethbridge housing market? Hey guys, my name's Kurtis Hawkins, and I'm a realtor located right here in Lethbridge, Alberta. And if you've never heard of me or this channel before, I have a ton of videos all about Lethbridge. So if you guys want to learn more about this beautiful city and why it's so inexpensive and why hundreds, if not thousands of people are leaving places like BC and Ontario and moving to Lethbridge, then feel free to binge all of the videos on this channel. Now I know interest rates going from 1 to 6% is pretty scary, and there's a ton of publicity out there talking about the looming housing crash, and housing prices are gonna drop between 15 to 20 to even 25%. And when you talk to people who live here, everyone gets a little nervous about the housing crash. But what you need to understand right off the bat is that Lethbridge, and Alberta especially, is not BC and is not Ontario. If you talk to realtors across the country, they're gonna say that pandemic and even post-pandemic, every single real estate market was insane. There was a ton more buys and a ton more sells than ever, and there was huge value increases across the country. Even here, which is pretty surprising because Lethbridge is usually known to be pretty stable and, quite honestly, kind of a boring real estate market. Now, when I say boring, that's because you don't usually see big spikes in value increases, but you also don't see big drops either. And that's usually pretty steady year after year. So to see a huge amount of sales and big price increases like this was pretty unusual. Now, before I unpack the Lethbridge housing market and go over why it's so stable and rock solid, if you're thinking about moving to Lethbridge, or you've already made up your mind and you're going to move to Lethbridge, down in the description below is a link to sign up for auto email listings. So all you have to do is type in your criteria, and every time a new listing hits the market within your criteria, you'll get an email as soon as it hits the market, so you never miss one. There's also a link to my app down there as well that you can use to browse listings, save your favorites, and there's even a built-in mortgage calculator. It's pretty handy. And it also has every single listing that's on the MLS. Now let's get back to this market. So if you look at this graph here provided by the Canadian Real Estate Association, you'll see exactly what I mean. Lethbridge does increase in value over the long term. However, it's very stable and very consistent, except you'll see that in 2020, there's been a pretty significant increase in value compared to what we've seen over the last 10, if not even 12 years. So here we can see the pre-pandemic median home price was about $275, and now it's closer to $350, which is about a 22% increase in almost about a 3-year span. So yes, we're seeing gains in general over the real estate market during COVID. However, it's still nothing like Vancouver, as you can see here in this graph. In Vancouver, the median price for a single family detached home in 2019 was somewhere around $525,000. Currently, it's sitting at around $850,000, which is a whopping 40% increase. So just by looking at these graphs here quickly, you can already see that the Vancouver housing market is pretty overinflated in comparison to the Lethbridge housing market. So when we're looking at the big crash in Vancouver in Ontario, it's actually probably needed because those big gains in real estate are not sustainable over the long term. I mean, we're always gonna see big spikes like this over the short term, but over the long term, it should start to average out to be more consistent gains. And we're never gonna see 20% gains year over year like this. It's just crazy. Not even in the housing market, not in a commodities market, and definitely not in the stock market. So yeah, I totally understand why the big centers like Vancouver and Toronto's housing market is gonna come down by about 20%, because they can totally afford to. However, it's not gonna cause a housing crash here in Lethbridge, because the Lethbridge housing market was only up 20% over the last 2 years. And yeah, the market here could come down a little bit too, but it's probably gonna be only about 5 or 10% on the high end. And if it does pass that 10%, I think it's gonna be very short term. But why is that? Well, other than the Lethbridge housing market not being as inflated, there's also pretty low inventory, and new construction just can't keep up with the demand, and it's becoming more and more expensive to build. Further than that, like I've said earlier in this video, there are a ton of people moving from BC and Ontario from those extremely high real estate markets to somewhere that they can actually afford a house like Lethbridge. Like we just saw with the current average price for a single detached home in Vancouver is $850,000, whereas in Lethbridge, it's only $350,000. And I can honestly say I have no clue how a first-time homebuyer is expected to afford anything near $850,000 for a first house. It's just absolutely mind-blowing. Now, over the summer, I would say that probably 80%, if not 90% of the deals that I did were mostly coming from people from out of town, like BC and Ontario, moving to Lethbridge. And I'm a little shocked there hasn't been more media about this, because I actually want to see the stats about how many people are actually moving to Lethbridge specifically from these other provinces. I did see this article here from the Daily Hive that said just in 2022, there has been more people move to Alberta than ever before. And it's a lot of people. I'm talking 34,000 people moved to Alberta just in Q2 of 2022. So when you think about that amount of population moving here, all of those people are gonna need a place to live, whether they're renting or buying. We just can't keep up with that much volume. And no one is talking about this enough. But if this mass migration keeps up, it's definitely gonna prop up the housing market. I mean, out of 34,000 people, if only 400 of those move to Lethbridge, that would eat up about 80% of the current inventory in Lethbridge right now. But what I do think is gonna happen in the Lethbridge real estate market is that the days on market is gonna increase pretty dramatically. I mean, during 2021 and 2022, we were seeing houses sold within the first day of them being listed. We saw multiple competing offers, and things like this just aren't that common in Lethbridge, and things are starting to already get back to normal. Our current day on market is about 55 to 65, depending on which week you're looking at, and we're not seeing houses get bid up in competition anymore. What that means for buyers is that it's gonna be much easier and way less stressful to find your perfect house than it was last summer. However, that is gonna mean that if you're selling your house, it's definitely gonna take longer, and you're gonna need a good realtor that has access to different marketing strategies to promote your house to help it get it sold for a reasonable amount in a good time frame and for a good price. So with all of that being said, just know that there are a ton of forces that are gonna keep the Lethbridge housing market strong, like the population increase, the inventory levels, the price of new builds, and the rate that new builds are going, as well as our historically steady housing market. But if you want to disagree with me, please do so in the comments down below. And if you guys like this video and found it helpful, please hit that like button. It actually helps me out. And if you never want to miss any of my weekly home tours, be sure to hit that subscribe button, and we'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.